Welcome, thank you for joining me. I hope you've been keeping well. The timestamps, as always, in the description box. Story number 1. Opie writes, My partner, 31 male, and I, 25 female, are having our second child, and he hasn't been working due to an in-work injury, so for the last 2 going on 3 months, it's been very stressful for us. My paternal aunt gave me half of what she got from selling my grandma's house, her mother. She inherited it last year due to my grandmother passing away, and she spent 6 months getting my mooches of a father and brother out of the house and fixing it up. We haven't spoken since the funeral, and last week she called me to meet for lunch, and when I went, she handed me a check worth over 200k. I didn't understand, but she said my grandma thought of me as a daughter, and I was the only one other than her that took care of her and my grandpa. And while they didn't have the money to give me, she sold the house and after talking to her husband, decided I deserved half of it. My hormones were everywhere, and she had to help me calm down because we were in so much debt and I felt so thankful. She told me she wasn't giving anything to anyone else and would prefer for me not to tell anyone, so I didn't. I put it in my account, and once it cleared, I began slowly paying off my husband's and my debt. I paid people back that had loaned us money, cleared our credit cards, paid our car off, put 10k in our daughter's savings account, and plan to make one for our second child when it's born. I didn't tell my husband because we have separate finances and have since we got together. He doesn't even know what our debts were or how far behind we were, so I didn't think he would notice. But he watches his credit, and when he says that it went up and that I had received a letter from my community college that my debt was paid, he asked me. I told him my aunt gave me money but not how much, and he tried accessing my bank account. When he couldn't get in, he took my debit card without me knowing and went to an ATM and saw the balance. He yelled at me for hiding it. I told him it doesn't matter because we were no longer in debt and we could finish our degrees. He walked out and hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. I requested a new debit card and changed my information regarding my account because now I don't trust him not to try to buy something. I admit I should have told him, but it's not like he knows how much money I make from my job. I don't know what to do. Edit. Okay, so reading the comments, I need to answer some questions. 1. He doesn't like my family at all. I met him when I was a kid because he was my older brother's best friend. Things changed when we got together and they don't speak anymore. He avoids anything to do with my family. 2. Most of our relationship is great. We agreed to have 1 kid because I dreamed of being a mom. But during the pregnancy, he treated me like crap. And even after our daughter was born, he continuously made me feel like a bad mom for asking him for help when I was exhausted and he just wanted to play games or drink. He only started helping and being supportive after being separated for a few months and us getting counseling. 3. He and my daughter both have my last name. 4. I wanted joint finances when we got married and he didn't. I was only in debt of 5k from my college at the time, and he had some, but he told me he had it covered, which I found out he did not. 5. What I meant about him not knowing how much in debt we were is that he'd open credit cards in both our names and max them out, and then when he couldn't use them anymore, he'd apply for more. I did not know this until hiring a firm to help get my credit up. They told me I could press charges or pay them off. I wanted to pay it off because he's my husband and even if he put us in debt, I do love him. 6. We didn't want more children. He got into a fight with his sister and she did something she shouldn't have, but he also refused to get snipped. We didn't find out I was pregnant until it was too late for another option. 7. We moved in with my mom to help us get back on track, and he got hurt at work. Yes, I believe he is depressed, but he's also blown all the money he had saved on video games, liquor, and pot. He didn't spend a dime on any of the debt he caused or for our daughter. He makes more than I do, but with the way he spends his money, it's like we live on one income. 8. Do I trust him? Yes, I do in almost every way I can, except for money. And he's proven that again and again. I also have been giving him small portions of the money so he can still go and do things he wants to do. It's not like I'm hoarding it away from him. I just didn't tell him that it wasn't from my paychecks like he assumed. He has the pins to my debit card because while I didn't tell him about the money, I do let him use it when he needs to. And here's OP's update. I'm not sure if this is how you update, but I figured I would go ahead and try. If you're watching my post, thanks for the advice. And even if some of the comments weren't that nice, I'm still thankful. Over the last 3 days, I've spoken to my mom and my in-laws. My husband reached out to her that he didn't want to be with me anymore, but it wasn't because of the money. It was because he felt forced to get married and have a baby. And even though we got pregnant with a second one because of his sister, he still blames me. 6 years together, and felt like he refused to talk about it, even when we were in counseling. I asked his mom what he wanted to do because he wasn't answering my phone calls or messages, and she said she sent him money for a plane ticket so he could go to her. I'm heartbroken that she didn't tell him to try harder for his kids. After all, his dad left him and his siblings. But I can't force him to stay, and I have to think about them right now. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I spoke to a lawyer my friend used for his divorce yesterday, and he's going to help me draw up a divorce plan. He said my husband can go after the money, but he doesn't think he will. I'm filing for full custody and will be asking for a minimum in child support unless he wants to sign his rights over. I'm done being stupid and thinking he will grow up. I packed his things and hired a moving company to take them to his mom's house, so all his stuff will be gone in a few days too. My first clue he didn't want our daughter was that she was not even crying asking where he is. She's just running around with me and my mom. I did send him a little bit of money for his travels and told his mom I'll send the divorce papers as soon as I get them. She just told me okay and hung up. So that's what's been happening the last few days. Haven't spoken to my soon-to-be ex-husband, and I'm now fully on my own since I was 19. I'm hoping everything goes good. Hopefully, I don't have to update again. Well, I don't know about all of you, but the thing I keep wondering about is what did Opie's husband's sister do? What did her sister-in-law do? Because Opie mentions twice that she became pregnant because of something the sister-in-law did, but she doesn't tell us what that something is. So it's a big question mark for me, what happened? And why is he blaming Opie and not his sister? But that aside, Opie, I do understand why you didn't tell your husband initially that you got this money. Why would anybody want to share that information with a significant other who lacks control when it comes to spending? Why would you put that temptation out there for somebody that's already spending way more than they can afford to? It sounds like you did everything in a very sensible way. You paid off the money you owed and so forth. If your husband had known about this money, maybe it would have gotten even worse before you even had a chance to start paying off that debt. And as for him leaving Opie, you are right. You can't force somebody to stay. It's better for him to go. If he's not involved in the life of your child and your soon-to-be second child, and he doesn't really care that much about the marriage, then there's no point in sticking it out and hoping that things will change and that he's going to grow up, that he's going to become more committed to the relationship and to the family. It's clearly not going to happen. Your soon-to-be ex-husband is now back with his mother, and I can just see him sitting there playing video games all day in his mother's house, and her eventually getting tired of him doing that as well. So he's her problem now, Opie. Good luck with your future. Let's move on to story number 2. Opie writes, "Welcome to the crap show. My wife got pregnant when we started dating at 16. We decided to give the kid up for adoption once she had him. It was a tough decision, but we weren't ready to be parents at 16. My older sister had just gotten married and found out she had infertility, so she proposed the idea of adopting our son. That way we could still be involved in his life and watch him grow up. My wife had him by C-section, and my sister has raised him since. We agreed that none of us would tell him until we all agreed he was old enough to understand it. Sure, it was tough to watch him go through life, knowing that's our kid, until we finally had kids when we were ready. We're now 36, and he's getting ready to turn 20. I've got a great relationship with him as his uncle. He comes to me with problems he can't bring up with his parents, comes to our house regularly to spend time with our kids, and even said that he considers me his, quote, dad, unquote, since his parents got divorced. Edit to add. We had conversations all the time about telling him as soon as he turned 13. Then it got pushed to 15, then to 18, and still no one had wanted to tell him. We had a deal. If he found a car he wanted to restore, I would pay for anything he needed if he did the work. My dad did the same thing when I was a teenager, and it was a great life lesson, and I still have that car to this day. He normally just calls me by my name, or a nickname made up by my wife, his mom, or the kids. Today, he came to the shop to do some work while I was out there working on something else. Then I hear, quote, "Hey Dad, my name, can you hand me a rag?" unquote. That was when I knew this kid needed to know. He's almost a grown adult. He can handle it. I told him I needed to tell him something. So we sat down at the table in there, and I just flat out told him, quote, "Wife and I are your birth parents," unquote. He looked confused because his mom had said she gave birth to him, so he would never think anything was up. He had lots of questions, and I answered them as honestly as I could. He left after and asked his mom about it, who then called my wife to tell her that I told him everything. I knew I should start digging my own grave in the backyard when she put her phone down with no words and just stared at me. She was livid. I didn't ask anyone before I told him. It was selfish, but it had to be done. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Edit. Wow, I had no idea this post would get this much support and positive comments. I effed up in many ways and felt terrible and like an a-hole for telling him. My sister wants to have dinner tonight with my wife and me to tell him the full story and to discuss what happens in the future. I'll make an update post after. And here's OP's update. To answer a lot of questions that were asked. After a little bit, my wife and sister thanked me for telling him. The day before that, my sister and her just had a conversation about telling him, and neither could bring themselves to. Yes, it was an a-hole move and selfish to do it without warning, but who knows how long they would wait to tell him. My wife and I never, quote, abandoned, unquote, him at all. We've been in his life since he was born, and for every major life step. Helped him with financial decisions like college, sports, and buying his first car, and helped in any way we could. Dinner went relatively well. My wife made delicious Parmesan chicken, in case anyone was wondering. A lot of emotions and conversations we weren't ready for. The main things that came out of our conversation were that my sister will always be his mom since she raised him. We will support him with whatever decisions he makes and will always be his family. He asked if he could call my wife and me his parents, and we happily agreed. He lightened the mood by saying, quote, "So now you're my dunkle and she's my mant, but not in a weird way, haha," unquote. So today we gained the older son we've always wanted, and our kids gained the older brother they've needed. I couldn't be happier with the decision I made last night. Well, OP, all's well that ends well. I think this kind of arrangement is a lot more common than most of us realize. And I'm sure quite a lot of us know people that raise their child's child, their grandchild as their own, or as in this case, a sibling that took the child and raised that child as their own. And sometimes it comes out and everybody knows, the child knows, everyone knows. And then other times it's an open secret. And everybody knows except the child. So I'm glad in your case, OP, that the truth is finally out and that your son is so loved. May your relationship with him just grow stronger and stronger as time goes by, and good luck with that car. I think it's a fantastic idea. Well, that concludes this installment. I thank you so very much for joining me. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing, leave a comment, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon. Bye, everyone.